World of Horror is set in the seaside town of Shiokawa, Japan, sometime in the late 1980s. As the modern world creeps forward with new technology, older things are stirring underneath it. Robed cultists have started appearing in the streets, people are vanishing, and grotesque creatures are being sighted around town. Somewhere out past the edge of the water sits a lighthouse, where a group of cultists is working to complete a ritual that will awaken an old god, an ancient being whose mere existence is hostile to human life. The player takes control of a young resident of Shiokawa, one of the few people who actually believes something is wrong, and sets out to investigate before the ritual finishes. Every playthrough tracks 3 core resources. Stamina works as health, and hitting 0 ends the run. Reason works as sanity, and losing it all leads to the character being institutionalized. Doom is the clock, counting down to the old god's arrival. And if it reaches 100%, the god manifests fully, and the game ends in a unique, god-specific catastrophe. Doom isn't just a threat sitting in the background, though. It also functions as the currency, spent to do almost anything outside of combat, investigating a location, resting at home to recover stamina and reason, visiting a shop. All of it nudges Doom upward. Solving a mystery lowers Doom. Ignoring it, resting too often, or wasting time investigating dead ends keeps pushing Doom higher. Most mysteries have several possible endings, depending on the choices made during the investigation. So completing one successfully doesn't necessarily mean uncovering the whole truth of what happened, only surviving it in one of several possible ways. One recurring mystery, Macabre Memoir of Morbid Mermaids, has the player investigating a string of disappearances tied to the school swim team, eventually tracing them to the school janitor. He's been obsessed with mermaid legends for years, and the missing students turn out to be his victims cut in half at the waist and had fishtails sewn onto the lower halves of their bodies in a botched attempt to turn them into mermaids himself. Confronting him leads to different outcomes, depending on how the fight against him is handled. Defeating him directly in combat leaves the player passing out in the school hallway afterward. Forcing open a manhole during the fight summons an actual deep-sea creature that kills the janitor itself, pausing only to note, matter-of-factly, that he had the anatomy backward. Toppling a lamp during the struggle burns the school down entirely, which permanently changes how that timeline's version of the school behaves for the rest of the run. Once all the necessary keys are collected, the lighthouse becomes accessible. Entering it locks the player out of returning to the rest of the town, and the player is forced to climb through a set of random events, typically 5, pulled from the lighthouse's own pool of encounters. Each one testing whatever stats and resources are left over after the earlier mysteries. At the top waits the ritual site itself, a summoning circle drawn in chalk, at the center of which the old god is being called into the world. Successfully disrupting the ritual at the center of the pentagram ends the run in victory, banishing the old god and closing out that particular threat to Shiokawa. Failing, running out of stamina or reason along the way, or letting Doom hit 100% before reaching that point instead triggers one of the game's many game over sequences. Each one narrated with a grim, specific description of exactly how the character meets their end. Which old god is threatening Shiokawa changes from run to run, and each one comes with its own rules that quietly reshape how the whole playthrough behaves. Fakatorasu, the spider god, tears its way out of a centuries-old cocoon prison roughly once every 300 years, and while it's active, escaping from combat encounters becomes impossible entirely. If its doom reaches 100%, invisible webbing spreads across all of Shiokawa, cocooning every resident, including the player character, to be devoured, one by one, over an indeterminate stretch of days, months, or years. Cthulhu, the Dreaming, is a colossal being lying dormant beneath a sunken city, whose defining trait is that reality itself may simply be its dream. If Doom reaches 100% during a run under its influence, the ending reveals that the entire world the player has been living in was Cthulhu's dream all along. Athulazith, called the Towering Eye, is tied to reports of ordinary people suddenly developing strange, supernatural gifts alongside stars vanishing from the night sky, and its presence Lighthouse changes how spellcasting works throughout the run, converting the usual reason cost of spells into doom cost instead. Guizo, described as a thing forsaken by its own god, uses mirrors specifically to ensnare and drag victims through the glass. What makes World of Horror linger after the credits roll isn't the specific old god the player happened to face. It's the roguelike quality of the run. Every run reshuffles which 5 mysteries get pulled from the game's full pool, so no 2 playthroughs solve the same problems in the same order, and no player ever sees the complete catalog of Shiokawa's horrors in a single sitting. The mysteries correspond one-to-one with the 5 keys needed to enter the lighthouse and confront whichever old god is threatening the town that run. The keys are earned, but the knowledge behind them almost never is. Most mysteries branch into several possible endings depending on the choices made during the investigation, which means solving a case and understanding it are 2 different accomplishments, and the game only ever asks for the first one. Doom is the mechanic that makes this loop feel inescapable, rather than just replayable. Doom functions as a time limit, rather than a health bar, and once it reaches 100%, the game ends regardless of how much stamina or reason the player has left. The cruelty is in how it's spent. Investigating a location costs doom, visiting a shop costs doom, and resting to recover stamina and reason costs doom too. So there's no genuinely safe action in the entire game, only actions that cost less than others. Even the final climb has a toll attached. Reaching the lighthouse doesn't pause the clock. It keeps ticking on the way up, meaning a player can walk in with the game already effectively lost before the old god's chalk circle is even in view. That structure explains why the ending, when it finally arrives, resists feeling like closure. Banishing the old god stops that specific threat, but it doesn't undo what happened to the town along the way. And it doesn't guarantee the same fate for the next cocooned resident, the next disappearance, the next thing pulled through a mirror. The game treats its horrors as survivable, rather than defeatable in any lasting sense. Beating an old god proves a person can survive contact with something incomprehensible, not that the thing is gone for good. If this one resonated, subscribe. New essays drop weekly, and you never know what's coming next. Share it with someone who'd get it, and leave a comment. I want to know which door this opened for you. Mystery Compendium, the archive is always open.